My name is Marietta Anderson, and I'm 32 years old. If you had told me a year ago that I'd one day be sitting across from my own mother, facing two lawyers, a smug stepfather, and my half-siblings who barely knew I existed, while they tried to rob me of everything my father left behind, I would have laughed. But here I was, and the truth is, I should have seen it coming. Let me take you back. Growing up, my family wasn't exactly picture perfect. Dad was the only stable thing in my life, the only one who cared more about doing right by people than pretending we were something we weren't. My mother? She cared about appearances, money, attention, anything that glittered. They divorced when I was 12, and honestly, it was the best thing that ever happened to Dad. I still remember that summer afternoon on the back porch when he told me. The wooden steps were warm beneath us, cicadas humming in the trees. He kept staring at his hands, unable to look at me. Marietta, your mom and I won't be living together anymore, he said. His voice was steady, but I could hear the exhaustion behind it. I wasn't surprised. For months I'd heard the late-night arguments, the slamming doors, the icy breakfasts afterward. I knew exactly what tore them apart. Is it about the money? I asked. Even then, I understood more than he realized. Dad looked at me, almost startled. You've been paying attention, he murmured. It's more complicated, but yes, that's part of it. What he didn't say, but what adulthood made painfully clear, was this. My mother didn't want a partner. She wanted a lifestyle, and Dad, a hard-working home contractor who counted every dollar, wasn't enough for her. The divorce gutted him. She drained him financially and emotionally, demanding alimony he could barely afford. But he never complained. He worked overtime, took extra jobs, and still made sure I never felt the strain. When I was with him, on weekends, holidays, we were a team. Fixing old lawnmowers in the garage, fishing at the lake, laughing at his terrible basketball commentary. At Mom's, I learned quickly that I wasn't part of her new world. 6 months after the divorce, she married Richard, a wealthy real estate developer, moved into a mansion, dyed her hair blonder, and filled her closet with labels I couldn't pronounce. Then came my half-siblings, Emily and Tyler, perfect accessories to her perfect new life. She wanted me to call Richard Dad. She would look disappointed, almost offended, when I refused. Honey, that was a different time, she'd say whenever I mentioned a memory from before. We've moved on. Moved on was code for we've replaced you. Dad, he never asked me to choose. She's still your mother, he'd say softly, but you don't have to let what she does dictate who you become. Then last year, he died. A sudden heart attack. No warning, no slow decline, just a phone call that shredded the world I'd built around him. One day we were planning a fishing trip. The next, I was picking out a casket. But it was what happened after the funeral that showed me what my mother truly was. Dad left everything to me. The house, the savings, the investments, all of it. He wasn't being unfair. He was protecting me. And he'd predicted exactly what my mother would do. Not even 7 days passed before she started calling. First concern, then guilt trips, then demands. You need to split it with your family, she said. By family, she meant her, Richard, and their 2 golden children, people who hadn't visited Dad in years. I told her no, repeatedly. That's when the mask came off. She started showing up at my door, banging like a debt collector. One evening, I came home from a 10-hour shift, only to find her standing on my steps in designer clothes, arms crossed, radiating fury. We need to talk, she snapped, pushing past me. I'm tired, Mom. Can we do this later? No, she barked. You've had time to sulk. Now you need to be reasonable. Reasonable to her meant surrender. I pushed back, hard. Fair would have been you visiting Dad in the hospital, I said. Fair would have been returning his calls. Her eyes hardened. That's ancient history. This is about what's fair now. This inheritance affects all of us. No, I said quietly. It affects me. Dad left it to me. End of discussion. Her face shifted, first soft, then sharp. You'll always be my baby, she whispered, reaching for me. I stepped away. That's when she dropped the act. You're choosing money over blood. Remember that. I held open the door. Funny, Mom, isn't that exactly what you did when you left? She stormed out, but I knew it wasn't over. When I stopped answering her calls, I started getting dramatic voicemails from Emily, followed by threats from my mother. Court. Contesting the will. Years of battles. Then an invitation arrived, on expensive cream stationery. The Anderson Hale family requests your presence for an important discussion regarding the estate of William Anderson. I almost threw it out. But something in my gut, something Dad used to call danger's whisper, told me to go, and not alone. My boyfriend Mike begged me not to. You owe them nothing, Mary, he said, pacing my kitchen. Your mother is setting you up. I need to know what they're planning. He hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but bring backup. He meant his ex-girlfriend Lana's advice. Lana was an attorney, but I refused. Lana always seemed a little too invested in Mike's life, a little too nostalgic for what they used to have. I wasn't inviting that chaos into this mess. Instead, I called Patricia, my father's lawyer, a woman Dad trusted more than anyone. This sounds like an ambush, she said. If you're going, I'm coming. Arrive separately. Don't tell them I'm involved. The day of the meeting, my hands shook on the steering wheel. Memories of awkward holidays and forced smiles crashed down as I stepped onto the pristine marble porch of the house I never belonged in. I walked inside, and instantly I knew. I had walked straight into a trap. The living room looked like a courtroom. My mother in the center, Richard beside her, Emily and Tyler perched on the sofa with smug, expectant smiles. Two lawyers waited with thick folders. One stood the second I stepped in. We're here to discuss the proper distribution of your father's assets. I almost laughed. Proper distribution? He handed me papers, pages of legal jargon drenched in entitlement. They wanted 75% of everything. I stared at my mother. You have got to be kidding me. She sighed dramatically. This is the best solution for everyone. Be reasonable, Marietta. Something inside me snapped. I smiled, slow, deliberate. Funny, I said, tossing the papers onto the table, because I brought someone too. The front door opened. Patricia stepped inside, and my mother's face lost every drop of color. Patricia didn't waste time. She walked in with the quiet confidence of someone who'd been preparing for this exact moment since before my father died. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor as she entered the living room, and every single person in that circle of vultures went still. My mother's face drained of color so fast I thought she might faint. Richard stiffened, gripping the armrest. Emily and Tyler shrank back, their smirks dissolving. Patricia didn't even look at them. She simply picked up the stack of papers I'd tossed onto the table, flipped through them, and exhaled sharply. Well, she said, this is cute. Illegal, but cute. One of the lawyers cleared his throat. We believe that given the circumstances— No, she interrupted. You believe you can coerce my client into signing away her lawful inheritance. Let me be absolutely clear. The will is ironclad. Any attempt to contest it will be dismissed, and any further harassment will result in legal action. Then Patricia pulled out a folder and set it on the table with a satisfying thump. A cease and desist, she said. Already prepared. Already filed. My mother's mouth dropped open. You can't be serious. I stepped forward, meeting her eyes. I told you I wasn't signing anything. You should have listened. Her expression flickered. Anger, panic, calculation, like she was flipping through emotional masks, searching for one that still worked on me. None did. What about your siblings? She hissed. You don't care if they struggle? I stared at the two people who hadn't visited my father in years. You mean the ones who didn't bother showing up at the hospital? The ones who let Dad die thinking they didn't care? My voice cracked, not with guilt, but rage. No, they don't deserve a thing. Tyler shot up. That's not fair. He never tried with us. I turned slowly. You called him a washed-up loser the last time he invited you for Christmas. He sat down again. Richard attempted diplomacy, leaning forward with a patronizing smile. Marietta, sweetheart. I cut him off. Don't call me that. His smile faltered. Then my mother stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. You would do this to your own family? She snapped. You stopped being family the moment you tried to steal from me. She clenched her fists. Then, slowly, she smiled, a small, cold curve at the corners of her mouth. Fine, she said. We won't fight it. Patricia narrowed her eyes, sensing the shift instantly. That was too easy. We left. But before I stepped out the door, my mother called after me. Take care of that house, sweetheart. You never know when. Accidents can happen. A chill crawled down my arms. Patricia looked at me in the car. That was a threat, she said plainly. I nodded, gripping the steering wheel. I know. The next morning, I drove to my dad's house, our house, telling myself I was being paranoid. My mother was dramatic, vindictive, selfish, but arson? That was extreme, even for her. But when I pulled up to the driveway, dread punched through me so violently I couldn't breathe. The front door was wide open, and I knew without question I had locked it. I pushed the door with trembling fingers. The living room was shredded, couch cushions sliced open, drawers overturned, my dad's framed photo smashed. On the wall, in red spray paint, one word: thief. My knees nearly buckled. This wasn't a robbery. Nothing was stolen. This was a message. I walked through the wreckage, each step heavier than the last. My dad's bedroom was destroyed, his clothes slashed, his tools scattered, his keepsakes broken. Even the garage was torn apart, the garden shed trashed. But the kitchen, that broke me. The oak table where Dad and I ate dinners for years, broken on its side, family photos torn into pieces. The refrigerator magnets, my childhood drawings, old grocery lists, lay shredded across the floor. I knelt, shaking as I picked up a shredded corner of an old photo. Just Dad's smile and half his eye remained. That's when the tears came, hot, uncontrollable. I wasn't crying for the house. I was crying because hatred had fingerprints, and they were all over this place. When the police arrived, their sympathy felt thin and tired. Without footage, one officer said, there's not much we can do. That sentence changed everything, because if footage was the problem, I'd get footage. For 3 days straight, I cleaned, repaired, and installed cameras. Top-tier security, inside and outside. I barely slept. Mike brought me food, tools, and quiet comfort. He helped repaint the wall where thief had been sprayed. You should press charges, he said. With what proof? I whispered. He hesitated. Then move, Mary. Don't stay here alone. I'm not running, I said. Not from them, not from this house. He watched me silently, then nodded. Then we fight. That night, exhaustion finally forced me to sleep, but fear slept light. Every whisper of wind sounded like footsteps, every creak like someone creeping inside. The fourth night it happened. At 2:37 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Backyard camera. 2. My heart slammed into my ribs. I opened the live feed and froze. There, moving through the dark, was my mother, dressed in black, carrying a flashlight. Behind her, Richard held a gasoline canister. My breath shattered. I hit record, then dialed 911. My mother and her husband are trying to burn my house down, I whispered. On the screen, my mother pointed to the base of the back wall. Richard began pouring gasoline. She handed him a lighter. But then, sirens. Fast. Getting closer. They panicked. My mother snatched the canister and ran. Richard stumbled after her. But they didn't make it far. Police cars swarmed the street. I watched, in real time, as they were caught in the headlights, gasoline dripping from the canister, both of them shouting frantic excuses. I drove there, half-dressed, shaking. They were shoving my mother into a squad car when she saw me. You set me up, she screamed. You did this to me. I stepped close enough for her to hear me. No, I said softly. You did this to yourself. She lunged. The officers restrained her. It was the last time I saw her face without handcuffs. And yet, the real twist hadn't even begun. The hours after the arrest felt unreal, like watching someone else's nightmare unfold. Flashing blue and red lights reflected off the wet pavement. Sirens faded into the distance, and the smell of gasoline clung to the cold night air. My mother had actually tried to burn my father's house down. Dad's house, the place he built with his own hands. And somehow, even with everything she'd done before, I still couldn't fully believe it. The police took statements, confirmed the gasoline, collected evidence. And by sunrise, my mother and Richard were sitting in jail cells wearing identical blank expressions in their mugshots. I went home, if you could still call that ravaged shell of a house home, and sat on the porch steps, gripping the railing as dawn crept across the sky. Mike rushed over the moment he heard. He dropped to his knees in front of me, holding my shaking hands. Mary, I'm here, he whispered. He was, but things weren't simple. Because at 8:14 that morning, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen too long, too carefully. I leaned over and saw her name, Lana, his ex. She had reached out the day of the break-in, claiming she heard about the crisis and wanted to help. Now she was calling again. You should answer, I murmured, unable to stop the bitterness slipping through. He frowned. No, you're my priority. But something inside me twisted. All this chaos, my mother, the house, the threats, had created cracks in places I thought were solid. Suddenly, every shadow felt like another betrayal waiting to happen. Just go take the call, I said. Maybe she has legal advice. I don't want her advice, he snapped. I want you. His frustration stung more than it should have. But I wasn't mad at him. I was mad at everything else. Everything that had led me to this moment where trust felt fragile. Mike softened. Mary, we're okay. Don't push me away. I looked down. I just can't lose anything else. He pulled me into his chest, and for the first time in days, I let myself collapse into his arms. The next months were a blur of hearings, paperwork, meetings with the prosecutor, interviews with detectives, and long, sleepless nights where every creak in the house sent my heart racing. My half-siblings tried to distance themselves immediately. Emily left tearful voicemails about how she was devastated and never knew Mom would go that far. Tyler sent a single text. I had nothing to do with this. Hope you're okay. I didn't respond to either of them. Actions were louder than apologies. The trial. 6 months later, the trial began. My mother arrived in handcuffs, looking thin, tired, and furious. She still tried to glare at me like I had betrayed her, not the other way around. She tried everything. Claimed she didn't know there was gasoline. Claimed she and Richard were checking on the property. Then claimed I set her up. Then claimed the footage was fake. Then cried. Then screamed. It was a parade of desperation. But the footage? Crystal clear. The prosecutor played it frame by frame. My mother pointing where to pour the gasoline. Richard flicking open the lighter. Both of them running when the sirens hit. There was no spinning that. When I testified, my hands trembled, but my voice didn't break. I told the jury about the threats, the break-in, the inheritance battle, everything. And as I spoke, I glanced at my father's lawyer, Patricia, who nodded with quiet pride. Then I looked at my mother. She didn't look remorseful. She looked offended, like I had somehow embarrassed her by surviving her attack. The jury took less than 2 hours. Guilty. My mother got 10 years in prison. Richard got 12. They tried to appeal. They lost. Justice didn't feel triumphant. It felt heavy, sad, necessary. But for the first time since my father's death, the weight on my chest loosened. Aftermath. With my mother behind bars, the world felt eerily quiet. No more threats. No more voicemails. No more storms waiting in the shadows. I repaired the house properly this time, replacing broken frames, restoring the garage, repainting walls. I hung up new photos of Dad, framed the cease and desist order Patricia had sent them, and kept the cameras installed just in case. My half-siblings disappeared from my life. Not a message, not a knock, nothing. Last I heard, Emily was drowning in credit card debt, and Tyler was getting fired from job after job. Not my concern. We weren't family. Not really. Mike and us. The trial stress, the fear, the house, the whole mess, it did something to me. I started pulling away without meaning to, expecting everyone to leave like Mom did. Mike stayed, even when I made it difficult. One evening, after the sentencing, I finally asked what had been gnawing at me. Why didn't you go back to Lana? My voice was barely a whisper. He set down the tools he was using to fix a window latch and sat beside me. Mary, I didn't want help. I didn't want comfort. I didn't want her. I wanted you. She still calls. Yeah, he admitted, but I don't answer. Silence hung between us until he gently took my hand. You're allowed to be broken, he whispered, but I'm not going anywhere. For the first time since losing Dad, someone's promise sounded safe. The home I chose. After everything settled, I finally moved into Dad's house. Not because I felt obligated, but because it felt right, like breathing again. I rebuilt his old workshop, finishing projects he never got to. Mornings were spent drinking coffee on the porch we used to share. Evenings were quiet, peaceful, grounding. Sometimes I still wondered what might have happened if my mother had simply chosen to be human, if she had respected Dad's wishes, if she had valued family over envy, greed, and ego. But then I'd hear Dad's voice in my memory, steady, warm. You can't control what others do, sweetheart, only how you respond. I responded the only way he taught me to, with integrity, with strength, with truth. That was his legacy, not the money, not the house, but the person he raised me to be. Tonight, I sat on the porch with my coffee, the sun dipping low behind the trees. I whispered into the quiet air, Dad, I kept my promise. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace.